What's up, everyone? This is Prince Robert Onyejiak with Prince Tech TV. So, for this discussion, I'm speaking with Bryan Thornton. He is the founder and director of NetReaction. Now, NetReaction is an IT consulting firm that focuses on IT security. So, Bryan has consulted for some of your Fortune 1000 companies. And in this discussion, because as we all know that cybersecurity has really taken its uprise, especially given the current time with the pandemic, etc. Bryan talks about how to diminish the risk impact in the event that some of these risks happen. And we're going to be talking about business email compromise and some social engineering. So stay tuned, listen to the tips, figure out how to protect your organization because Bryan has a lot of knowledge to share. And I think that there's some great things to really learn from this discussion. Hey, Bryan, how you doing today?
Hey, good, Robert. I hope you're well.
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks
Good.
again for joining Prince Tech TV. And we're going to be talking about some very interesting topics today. And what we want to start off with was how to mitigate the risk of social engineering and business email compromise attacks. And so,
Sure.
being an IT security expert, you have your own consulting firm, and it's called Net Reactions, and you're doing very great things. So, could you tell us a little bit about what you know about the question I just asked?
Yeah, it's interesting when it comes to business email compromise, in terms of downtime and in terms of just dollar losses associated with events. Almost all of the biggest events of the last couple of years have actually originated from some type of business email compromise, or we'll just say some type of click-based event, right? Somebody gets an email, they click on something they shouldn't, and that causes some unintended consequence, whether that's email account takeover, or they use those credentials to get into your internal network and maybe exfiltrate information, install malware, install CryptoLocker or ransomware type software, any of those type things. We see a lot of financial fraud, literally bank account takeover or ACH, EFT type fraud. And all of those come from click-based events most often. We all have these email boxes. We get stuff in them every day. And sometimes people click on stupid stuff. I'm actually a little bit of a contrarian as a forensic scientist when it comes to click-based events, in that I think in the industry right now, there's a lot of talk about, hey, doing, social engineering education, phishing education. Hey, hover over these links before you click on something. Don't click on things from people you don't know, all of those things. And I'm supportive of all of those things. But all of those things, education related, come with a caveat, which is we can't educate our way to zero clicks.
Right.
Sooner or later, somebody's going to click on something. And depending on the access they have, depending on, the ability of their credential sets, how your network is set up, those consequences can be pretty devastating. And so as forensic professionals and information security professionals, we actually change that focus a little bit and say, instead of, hey, how do I keep from clicking on stuff that we shouldn't, right? And this data is known. So in any given user population, somewhere between 1.5% and 3% of users are going to click on that message, right? So in 100 different emails, somewhere between 1 and 3 are going to click. That's our typical users. When we come into IT and when we come into the management suite, those numbers actually go up to 3.5% to 5%. So in management, we are actually way more likely to click on one of those events than one of our
So
one users.
one in three for people that are not in business and IT.
Oh no, I'm sorry, not 33%, between 1 and 3%. So
1 and 3%.
Yes,
Okay.
in 100 different messages, that payload will get clicked on somewhere between 1 and 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, typically what happens when we do education, we see those numbers go down momentarily, but then they return very quickly back to steady state, right? If I were to graph it out, we can see where we do education, and then it goes back to that steady state. And so I think that has to change our focus, right? If we know that, hey, look, people are going to click on these things, we have to change our focus from how can I keep people to click or keep people from clicking to how do I make the consequences associated with someone clicking matter less, right? Sometimes
Okay.
I liken this to my youngest child, Henry, who when he was young, he has 2 older sisters who love to swim. But Henry was like, you know what? I swim on the stairs. He was not the least bit interested in learning how to swim. And yet he's a boy, right? And we know that, like, look, he loves to chase his sisters around the pool with water guns and all these things. We know it's only a matter of time until Henry falls in the pool. If I were to treat Henry like most of us treat our risk associated with email, we would just be like, well, stinks to be Henry. And somebody would call, you know, Child Protective Services, right? And be right in doing so. But no, instead, what happens there? My wife and I take precautions when he's out of the pool, knowing that sooner or later he's going to fall in. How do we make those consequences matter less? We try to teach him how to swim, or at least kind of how to drown proof himself, right? If you fall in, how to get to the side and not panic. We put some type of flotation on him. You know, we encourage him to stay in the shallow end. We are always watching when the kids are out there. You know, we're not on our phone or something like that. We make those consequences that could be very dire matter less. And so I think we have to do that with email as well.
Right. So a lot of it is, okay, so we know what the problem is, but what you're just saying is make the impact less. So
Right.
if somebody were to click on the wrong thing, it affects your or the organization less dramatically. Is what you're saying,
and I can,
because it's just inevitably going to happen regardless.
right. And I can
Okay.
talk about, you know, hey, what are those things that we do to make it matter less? Because sometimes I think information security, you know, it seems like it's rocket science, and it's not. It's better, more consistent application of fundamentals, right? So when it
Right.
comes to email, 3 things really matter. Number 1, multi-factor authentication. If I only had one recommendation for my clients in the year 2020, and I could get them to do one thing, make one change, and that one change would probably make me have to find something else to do for a living, I would gladly trade it for just multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication absolves us of a multitude of sins. Really, in 2020, the username and password have really outlived their life expectancy. We just can't trust users to keep them secure, or that they're unique from other places they use in their life. And so we have to then make it tie back to, you know, something they have as well, these magic rocks that we all carry around, or, you know, something like that, so that when you log in from somewhere else, it says, hey, Robert, let's make sure that's really you, right? And it texts you the code, or you use the app to get that authentication code. And that means when you click on something else, and then somebody logs in from Eastern Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from wherever, trying to, you know, impersonate you, it says, hey, can we just make sure this is really you? That by itself is the number 1 thing you can use to secure your email, both in your personal life and in your business. And with business, I would say, look, multi-factor authentication by itself is a reason enough to move your corporate mail over to Office 365 or Gmail if you haven't done that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is reducing the use of domain authenticate or domain administrator credentials on your network. So for last 2 years, if we look at the biggest ransomware CryptoLocker breaches by dollar loss out there, 100% of them have something in common, and that is domain admin credentials hijacked and being used in places to basically, further spread this malware, ransomware. So many of us in IT, we get lazy, or it's just the way we've always done things, where,
Right.
my account has a bunch of privileges, and those privileges, if I click on something stupid, allow that malware, that ransomware, whatever, to spread. And so for a long time, we've been separating out credentials. So I will have maybe a daily use set of credentials, those credentials that I use to check my email, to do my daily tasks that are not privileged, and then a set of credentials that I use if I have to administrate something, if I have to step up my privileges, then I will log in with those credentials. Actually, the most mature organizations out there are even taking it a step further in installing or using privileged account escrow. So I only have a daily use set of credentials, but I have the right to check out a set of administrative credentials if I need them, once I show who I am. And then when I log out, when I do whatever I need to do, that password is automatically rolled. So that's number two, reducing the use of domain admin credentials. And then number three, for your user, reducing the use of local administrator credentials. Your user should not be able to install software on their own machine. And again, this is often convenience. Sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes it's we have software vendors that say, hey, look, I require local admin rights, or even domain admin rights. And really in 2020, that's a good prompt to look for another vendor, because that local admin access, if we can stop it at the local level, we can keep it spreading from across the network.
Interesting.
Those three by themselves will greatly reduce risk profiles associated with click-based events. If I were to add two more, it would be knowing your technical debt, right? So keeping up with vulnerability management, keeping up with that stuff that can't be updated to a fully current level, or something will break, right? A lot of us who have been around for a while, a lot of us who have, organizations of any size, look, we've got some stuff out there that, we may not be able to update to a fully current level. And that represents risk. Not saying that you have to, tear it all out of your network, but we need to be aware of it. We may need to put some compensating controls in place, and really track that. The last one is just backups, right?
Right.
In the forensic world, we would say Schrodinger's law of backup supplies, which is you don't actually have backups until you have successfully recovered from them. So many situations that we go into, organizations think they have backups in place and they don't, right? Oh, that system wasn't being backed up. Oh, these backups have been failing for months, whatever. And what turns, or what could have been a minimal disruption, turns into a massive disruption. And really all five of those controls, that's what they do. They magnify events, right? They take what could be a minor inconvenience and turn it into a major disruption, or even in some cases, an existential event.
Okay. And I got another question for you, Bryan. So why do you think that people don't implement those five techniques that you just proposed? You think it's like I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And oftentimes, honestly, it's because we underinvest in IT and we over rely on IT for information security stuff. So that is, good information security is not an IT problem. It's a management problem, full stop. And, in all kinds of organizations, you go just about anywhere these days and you're rarely going to find an IT guy who says, man, I don't have stuff to work on today, right? No, they're always busy. They're always resourced. And so, when it comes to multi-factor authentication, it has to be something that we prioritize, right? And management needs to champion that. And when I say that, MFA is one of those things where for a good while, there was a sort of user adoption problem, right? Of, hey, how are we going to get our users to, not push back against this? We can barely get them to remember a password. How are we going to get them to do this too, right? And so there was some pushback there. That ship has largely sailed. So many of our clients report back to us these days when they install it, their users basically say, it took you long enough. Because they're being expected to do it everywhere else in their life. They're being expected to do it on their social media, on their bank accounts, on their retirement accounts, all those things. They're having to use MFA, and so we've kind of gotten over that adoption hump, and we just need to turn it on. Domain admin rights. This can get into a sort of the way it's always been versus how should it be type of argument. And sometimes, as IT people, we need to protect our environments from ourselves. Here in my office, look, I'm the founder and managing director of this firm, and there are systems in this office that I do not have access to. I can get access to them if I need them. But when it comes to evidence and things like that, and having to answer to that when it comes into court as to who's touched it and what have you, it's just easier if I don't have access to that. Right. So we have to step down a little bit with some humility and say, hey, look, the data shows that we click on those emails more often than our typical counterparts do. We need to insulate our environments from ourselves. And nobody wants to be, patient zero, if you will, in some ransomware event or something like that. And so it's really taking things that, on the front end are going to create a little more work, but really add a lot of resilience on the back end.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I appreciate that, Bryan. I see that we may be running out of time, but I think that your explanation on how to protect organizations and just how people kind of overlook things as it relates to keeping your organization or department secure, or just for you personally, has been very great and insightful for the viewers. And I think that we all have a lot to learn from Bryan. So I really appreciate that.
Well, Robert, likewise, I appreciate just get in the pulpit to preach this message from. We often say to our clients, the people we talk to, there's zero penalty for us talking you off the cliff. I would much rather have a conversation at 12:30 in the afternoon than at 12:30 in the morning when I'm saying, oh man, Robert, I wish you had called me yesterday afternoon and we could have taken care of this, right?
Yeah.
And so, I would repeat, there are no complex topics in information security. It is all about better, more consistent application of fundamentals. And so to your viewers, to anybody who might listen to this, if they've got questions, if they want to talk about that some more, man, you're welcome to send them my way. And I'm happy to help them direct those conversations.
All right, you hear that, guys? Send them his way if you have any questions. So I appreciate that again, Bryan. And before we leave off, Bryan is a former professor of mine at Lipscomb University, where I got my master's in healthcare information technology, and very impactful guy. He was the professor for IT security. Can't remember the actual course title name, but just wanted to throw that in there. And I appreciate what you're doing for people and trying to, give your knowledge on IT security. I think that's great. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I'm excited to see everything my former students do and the success that you guys have. Know that you do not have somebody pulling for you more than me.
Right. And he's not lying about that. He's definitely telling the truth. Thanks again, Bryan. I appreciate you for coming out to Prince Tech TV.
You bet. Robert, have a great day.
All right. Thank you. Bye.